Hi, this is Anna, and welcome to the Sommpour Deep Cut on wine business. When students think about the diploma, D2 often sits in a strange corner of the mind. It's not as obviously technical as D1, it's not as intensive as D3, it doesn't smell like oak or terroir or botrytis. It's the business one. And because of that, a lot of people either underestimate it or quietly fear it. They worry they're not finance people or marketing people, so D2 must be the paper where they're found out. The examiner reports tell a different story. D2 doesn't need you to be a CFO or a brand director. It needs you to do three much simpler things under calm pressure: read the question, plan a focused answer, follow the money, the bottle, and the brand, and explain the logic of what's happening. That's what this episode is about: how to think like a wine business for 60 minutes, not in spreadsheets, on paper. Let's start with the shape of the exam itself. D2 is a 1 hour paper. Most recent sittings have 3 or 4 questions, each with a clear percentage weighting: 10, 20, 35, 40, sometimes 45%. That weighting isn't decoration, it's a time map. And yet, year after year, examiners say the same thing. Candidates write a page and a half for a 15% question, then don't have enough detail for a 40% one. Or they pour their hearts into the first question on the page because it feels familiar and limp into the last one because time has vanished. So, your first piece of business logic is not about wine at all, it's about time. Think of it like this: 1% of the paper is roughly 35 to 40 seconds of your life once you're in the exam hall. That makes a 10% question a 6 minute task, a 40% question around 24 minutes, including a short plan and a tiny bit of checking. If you can keep that in your head, you've already changed your relationship with the paper. You've given yourself permission to keep the 10% answers short and disciplined, and you've protected the space you need where the marks actually live. The second piece of logic is the command verb. D2 is not an essay paper like D3, but the verbs still quietly run the show. When the question says describe, it's inviting you to recall facts cleanly. Describe three types of price promotion really does mean name them, define them accurately, and move on. When it says explain, it wants cause, effect, consequence. Explain why supermarkets dominate some wine markets, is not satisfied with they buy in volume and keep prices low. It wants to hear that supermarkets have huge purchasing power, that this lets them negotiate lower wholesale prices, that they can then offer a broad range at attractive price points, drawing footfall and building consumer habit, which reinforces their dominance. Outline is gentler. It asks you to sketch a process or sequence without going into the weeds: the on primer chain, the product life cycle, the steps in the 3 tier system. Compare asks you to put two things side by side and actually contrast them: estate versus cooperative, bulk shipping versus bottle, website versus wine tourism. If both paragraphs could be copied and pasted into separate questions, you're not truly comparing them. Discuss or assess are your cue to go one level up again, to weigh up, to consider pros and cons, to reach a modest, sensible conclusion. The candidates who do well in D2 don't write more, they match their thinking to the verb. Underneath all of that sits the actual content of the unit, which, once you peel it back, revolves around three big lenses. The first lens is cost and price logic. D2 spends a lot of time following the costs that accumulate from grape to bottle: land, labor, machinery, cellar space, oak, maturation time, transport, duties, retail overheads, marketing. Some questions spin that lens to the vineyard, costs involved in managing an existing vineyard and how they affect the price of wine. Others jump into the winery, from grape reception to bottling for a low volume super premium Chardonnay. Others move further down the chain, costs of running a brick and mortar retailer or costs of establishing a winery and cellar. Whatever the angle, your work is the same. You group the costs into a few clear buckets in your mind: property, labor, equipment, and materials, storage, logistics, marketing, and overheads. Then you explain what each bucket looks like in the scenario you've been given: a steep hand worked site versus a flat mechanized one, a deep discount chain versus a fine wine bar, and what that means for the final price and margin. Weak answers just say costs are higher. Stronger ones say where, why, and with what commercial consequence. The second lens is routes to market and market structure. Here you're dealing with business models: estates, cooperatives, merchants, virtual wineries, custom crush facilities, and then the frameworks those businesses move through: distributors, importers, supermarkets, independents, hospitality, direct to consumer channels. You'll also meet specific systems like Sweden's monopoly, System Bolaget, whose core aim is to limit alcohol abuse by controlling access, price competition, and promotion, and the USA's three-tier system, designed after prohibition to keep producers and retailers separate, make tax collection easier, and prevent tied houses dominating the on trade. When a question lives in this lens, you'll often see the word advantages and disadvantages attached to a particular perspective, from the point of view of a producer, a consumer, an investor, a retailer, or even the state. The play here is simple and surprisingly rare. Take that perspective seriously. If the question asks for the drawbacks of on premise and auctions for a wine investor, you stay with the investor. Opportunity cost, lack of guarantee, liquidity, storage risk, the risk of market correction. You don't drift back to the producer's cash flow benefit or the prestige of releasing early. Those might be true, but they're not the angle you are asked to write from. And the third lens is brands, consumers, and promotion. This is where we talk about the product life cycle, brand ladders, private labels, umbrella brands, supermarket exclusives, about advertising versus public relations, sponsorship, social media, smartphone apps, cellar door, wine clubs, and websites, and about that deceptively familiar phrase, price promotion. Almost every question in this territory breaks down into the same steps: define the tool, explain how it actually works in the real world, then tie it to its aims and risks. So, for sponsorship, you might describe a mass market brand sponsoring a sporting event, explain logo placement, branded merchandise, hospitality pouring rights, and then link that to reach and brand association on the plus side and cost and reputational risk on the minus. What examiners are tired of, and they say this very clearly, are vague lines like: today many people spend a lot of time on their phones, so apps are important. Or PR builds awareness and tells your story. None of that is wrong. It's just not enough. D2 wants you to show how a wine business would actually deploy these tools and what trade off they're making when they do. Once you see those three lenses: costs, route to market, brands, and promotion, D2 questions stop feeling like random business trivia and start feeling like variations on a theme. Cost questions ask, where is the money going? And how does that shape price and positioning? Advantages and disadvantages questions ask, how does this model work? And what does it give or take away for the specific person we're talking about? Process questions, on primer, three tier, system bolage, product life cycle. Ask, can you walk me through the stages clearly? Then answer the follow up on aims or pros and cons. Perspective questions ask, can you stay in one pair of shoes and not wander off into someone else's? Underneath all of them, the examiner is watching for the same habits. Have you read the whole question? Have you noticed the weighting? Have you matched your depth to that weighting? Have you kept your answer inside the boundaries of scope and perspective? And have you moved beyond description into explanation when the verb demands it? The scripts that fall short aren't full of wrong facts. They're full of half answers, padded openings, irrelevant paragraphs, and missed instructions. Talking about vineyard establishment when the question starts at grape reception. Writing lovingly about wine tourism when the question only asks why a producer might avoid it. Giving four factors when the question says three only. Leaving a 10-mark section blank because time ran out on a minor question earlier. D2 is not out to trick you. It's asking you to think like a calm, practical business person for an hour. Clear about where money is spent, clear about how wine moves from producer to consumer, and clear about how brands grow and communicate along the way. You've already done much harder thinking for D1, D4, D5. D2 is about organizing that same brain into the language of cost, channel, and strategy. If you'd like a written copy of this D2 playbook or want to join one of the Sommpour study circles where we turn these ideas into timed answers, you'll find the link in this podcast. For now, take a breath and remember you do not need to be a business person to pass D2. You just need to read with care, plan with intention, and explain what's happening in the glass and in the spreadsheet as two sides of the same story. That's the Sompo way of doing wine business. I hope you enjoyed listening, and I'll see you on the next deep cut.